Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Keshanar Confidential. This is a series where we're taking a look behind the scenes at the making of the Kingdom of Keshanar, which is an upcoming D&D 5e setting that is based on ancient Egypt that asks the very important question, what if the gods, the magic, and the monsters were real? Now, for the past couple episodes, we've been talking to some of the writers and DMs behind the project, but we're going to switch gears today and talk to someone who is working on quite possibly the most unique aspect of this project. So, Mitch, hello.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who Mitch is?
Sounds good. My name is Mitchell Waringa. I am the owner of Masterworks Studio based out of Atlanta here in Georgia. I've been doing 3D modeling and development for the better part of a decade. And more recently, we have gotten into Unreal, game development, which, kind of brings us here today and what we're hopefully going to discuss and unravel a little more.
Yes, I am so excited to talk to you because, as I said, this is obviously a very unique part of the project, but also as someone with a background in 2D art, anyone that can do things in 3D is a wizard.
I appreciate it.
Okay, so just for background purposes, how did you get involved with the Kingdom of Keshanar?
So I've been on a platform called Upwork that maybe many of you have heard about. I've been on there for roughly 5 years. It's a slow grind, but has definitely paid off. I think it's been a little over a year, maybe even going on 2 years now. Um, Dave Haddon first reached out to me because he needed a short little video of a globe or a planet from space, kind of revealing his world for this campaign, and it started from there. I kind of showed him what I could do, and got him what he asked for, and I seen that he was building everything in Blender. I think he said he spent about 5 years slowly kind of building this 3D environment in Blender, and it was just predominantly going to be for book art. And I kind of hinted at that I love the project. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for probably about a little over 20 years now myself. And I asked him, I was like, what if you could walk around? Would you like that? And it blew his mind. And he's like, let's unpack that. Like, what can we do? And that's how the idea of recreating everything in Unreal started.
I absolutely love that a recurring theme with pretty much everyone that works on this project is Dave hired me for this, but I ended up doing, X, Y, and Z also.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, since obviously you mentioned that you have a lot of experience with D&D, how has that affected the way in which you approach this since you have such a long history as a player?
So playing D&D for me started out probably as most people, you got into the story, developing the characters and just kind of really seeing what you could do. And as I started working more into my career as a creator, not necessarily focused on Dungeons and Dragons, it helped me to look at here's my skills as an artist. But if I pull back and look at my time playing Dungeons and Dragons, I remember all of the things I love to do and thought, man, like, what if I could have a 3D character, or what if I could have like miniatures of the castle I want to make? And it starts to unravel all these concepts, and you think like, okay, now I have the tools I need to be able to kind of create some of these concepts that I would have loved to have had, as a kid growing up playing Dungeons and Dragons. So it helped me kind of structure these concepts for a much more engaging, a different perspective and feel, and engagement with Dungeons and Dragons outside of just pencil and paper. Now it's going to allow you to visually get into some never before seen environments and worlds that you kind of could only imagine. And now with being able to get this on Unreal, you can start to interact and actually play, as the DM, as you're flying around and just telling your story, or even from a first person perspective as the player, the character in this world, to really get a sense and feel for what the story's trying to tell you.
As far as I know, this is the first project I've seen for D&D that has such an extensive, like a whole city basically rendered in Unreal for the players to use. Do you feel like we're going to start seeing more of that in the future?
I hope so. I have, loved the concept since Dave and I first started talking about it. And looking through everything that's available as a D&D tool online or physical tools and stuff doesn't compare to what we're doing here. Even uh, um, D&D Beyond Wizards, um, their most recent tool is only structured for a small little sliver of an environment. So it's going to be, um, just like bar that you're in, and you have a few players in there and you can roll dice in this small little bar environment. We want to take that idea and expand it for a full traversable world. And I don't see that happening anywhere.
Since you talked about using this as a tool, which honestly, the applications of this for both a player and a DM are just boundless. But one of the main things we've noticed that people get really excited about, beyond the fact that they can just walk around the city and experience it,
Hmm.
is that they can create maps absolutely on the fly. Does
Yes.
that come into consideration at all when you're making the city?
Absolutely. The first thing that we started when building the city was just to kind of get a feel for, what is this world that he's creating? Because pictures only do it so much justice, right? Being able to get in there and get into these small little alleyways that most people never really would consider. Just kind of feeling like this is your home, this is your world, and being able to create any content around this map is limitless. Um, and then we sort of get into like outside of just showing the lore, and kind of telling the story, what else is this used for? And then so we added the ability to change camera perspectives and take some top down screenshots so you can instantly use them as battle maps, because a lot of people will make campaign settings and they're wonderful to play through. But as I've heard, there's two different sides. There's your world and my world. And if I'm going to use this campaign setting, I might come up with my own stories to tell using tools that you have provided me. So I might, do something in this alleyway over here where you don't have any, short stories or little campaign settings that run through that. But now with this tool, I can go in and plot out exactly what I want to do and make little maps of every little area where players can be involved or getting into, some fights or whatever it may be. And then from there, it even evolved even more because we're like, why are we limiting ourselves to just outside perspectives? So we evolved the tool now to, you know, programmatically, word I can't pronounce. Um, it allows you to go into a building and it's going to register where you're standing and what floor you're on based on where your character is at. It's going to remove the roof and every floor above you so you can then go into these buildings and go into like the sewers or go into the cellars or go into like the bar on the first floor or like the second floor balcony of a fighting pit, and also take top down screenshots of those to not only use the outside visuals but bring everything inside as well, which drastically increases playability and options for anyone trying to write their own campaigns.
I love what you said about being able to go inside the buildings, and not just that, but having the multiple floors and even underground options. Because and I'm sure a lot of other people are like this also. Whenever I play a game, especially a video game, I have this compulsive curiosity where I see a building and I'm like, "Can I go inside of it?"
Yep.
Is switching gears here a little bit, the the dedication to the actual history of ancient Egypt, obviously, this is not like a one-to-one recreation because, we have, like, dragons and giant centipedes out in the desert. Um, but how has that affected the way in which you build the city?
So Dave has put together a remarkable team because it's very important to him and us as creators and writers and artists to do a homage, if that's the correct term, to the Egyptian culture. Um, it spanned such a huge time period that there's so much to digest and learn and understand that having the right people on your team will bring this campaign, although it's a fantasy and made up world, but bring it to, you know, people in a manner which is hopefully respectable on, the culture and everything. So having someone that actually knows how to read hieroglyphs is very important. Having, the correct look and feel for certain textiles and colors and skin tones and everything when we're trying to recreate human environment and interaction is very important. So when we're developing the city, it's important to get, not only the building looking and feeling right from an architectural standpoint, it is also important to, get the correct colors and the cartouches and the hieroglyphs and all the different textiles correct as well, because we want to feel as authentic and engaging as possible.
I think that's a very important point, not just about the dedication to the history and getting it right, but so much of this project is serving the engagement of it because D&D is a very community-driven and interactive experience just by nature of what it is. And do you feel like 3D environments like this one that you're building will help further that?
I think it can if done right. Right? There's always two sides of, everything, and there's going to be some people that, won't like it. They'll pick it apart and say this is not accurate. And, we will do the best that we can, and we absolutely love that feedback because we want to make sure that something that we're telling people is what we're actually doing. Um, so it is very helpful. It's very important, and it's something that we're going to continually strive to achieve to make sure it's as accurate as we can, but yet still bringing in those fantasy elements for the other side where people are just like, hey, I love the concept, I love the feel, I love the theme, you know, but let's have fun with it, right? Let's get really creative as much as possible as well.
There's been a real increase in the past several years in the amount of people who are streaming tabletop games now on Twitch or YouTube or wherever. And do you think that being able, as a viewer, to see how things are playing out in such a visceral environment as opposed to having to rely on the quote unquote theater of the imagination, do you think that's going to affect the way in which people view gameplay now?
I think it can. I think there's going to be definitely a crowd for people that will love the new visual immersion of being able to tell the story. Just like someone that enjoys reading books, they use their own imagination, based on what's being described, and that's never going to go away. Um, but then for someone that loves the fantasy and loves to get into a story, but they're not the type that typically reads maybe like the Lord of the Rings books, but they do all the movies. And that's, it's like I need the movies to really get engaged. And with this, new way of, kind of bringing people into the world, I think it's going to just, as we've already stated, that it's going to be a new tool allowing people to just get some more engagement and get some better visuals for their storytelling.
When people hear Egyptian city, ancient Egyptian city, most people kind of run immediately to, oh, pyramids and mummies. But I know that in the Unreal that you'll we have obviously way, way more than that. Could you walk us through some of the districts and some of the buildings that you've built so far?
Oh my goodness. Okay. I am not as amazing at the lore as most of the writers are. A big one that I can at least try to talk on and hopefully do it some justice is Soul Crush. Um, and that is important from a standpoint of the stories because that is the original city of Keshanar, right? So if you think of, you have your old town, and stuff like that in the real world, and where everything started and expanded out from there. Soul Crush is ours, and it has, all of the burial tombs and everything in there, amongst many other things. So, what I have enjoyed about this is, all these districts that have been added, they serve a purpose, and they have history behind them, and it's kind of shown throughout the map as when you traverse from one district to another. So if you start in Soul Crush, it is a much more older rustic feel. The buildings are smaller. There's only like one major temple in there. It's all walled off because it's the original section of the city. And then once you go out to like the new areas, um, you start to get arenas. You have different, two different arenas. You have, an area called Troll Town, which, although, the name suggests, maybe troll or gruesome or a little, lower end or whatever, it's not necessarily that. There's a lot of lore that comes into each section of this town that, when complete, a player is going to not only be able to read the books and go through, all the lore, they'll be able to interact and experience that in the Unreal environment as well, where we'll have little tablets or kiosks that we call them that you can go and click on, and it's going to give you all of the same lore the book is going to tell you. So you can go through this almost as if it's a game, but again, it's important. It's not a video game, but it's just a way to, digest and feel out the campaign and the lore without necessarily going through the books 100%.
I love that we have the information about the setting is accessible in so many different mediums. We actually on our YouTube channel have a video called Welcome to Soul Crush, which I encourage everyone to watch because it shows off a bit of Mitch's amazing work. Um, I'm going to ask you something, and
Hmm.
every time I ask one of the writers or artists a question like this, they are a little bit like, "Come on, Lady X, this is like asking me to pick a favorite child." What has been your favorite thing that you have created so far?
Okay. Weirdly, I am a firm, believer in functionality and does it serve a purpose. Um, so I love building the city. I love being creative and seeing, what elements can we add to really make it look amazing and be immersive. Um, but from a creative standpoint, you know, outside of just being able to walk through the city, it's been how can I use the city or how can I use this Unreal environment to aid or assist me. So I'm proud of and I love being able to do things that bring new ability and tools to the fingertips of the user. So being able to create the map system that we're still developing for like being able to do the top down, screenshots for, dungeon tiles and stuff like that. That I think has probably been my favorite currently, but we have a lot more planned for this. So I'm sure that might change down the road.
So I know we've obviously talked a lot about the Unreal map, but you're also involved with something else really neat on this project, yes?
I believe so, but you might have to refresh my memory.
The minis that we have.
Hmm. Yes,
So I need you to tell us all about those because I have a sick love of miniatures.
absolutely. So this has been something that we've been kicking around for a little while, but really haven't pulled the trigger until like maybe a few months ago. And just like any tabletop, right? You have characters that you can play and you want a little miniature that represents you on the grids and the battle maps and stuff. And if you don't wind up having a miniature, you'll use a chess piece or maybe just some, D6 dice or whatever, right? Whatever you can make work. Um, so we already have all of the characters that are being developed for this unique campaign setting, and what better way to not only draw them for illustration purposes and the monster manuals and stuff like that, but we're bringing many of them to 3D. And what we can do with 3D is we can obviously print it out. So, we are working with a small group of very talented, 3D modelers and stuff to, be able to develop our own miniatures that, we will have available. Um, I don't know if they're going to initially be available on the Kickstarter. I think they will be. Um, but we'll have dungeon tiles, we'll have player character tokens, and we'll have monster tokens as individual packs or individuals for people to buy and use. Um, and I think we might even go as far as just selling the STL files if you want to print your own um, and paint them and go from there.
So would you say that we have many minis?
We have many minis.
I'm not going to be mean and ask you to say that 10 times fast, okay?
Fair enough.
I know also, giving a little peek behind the curtain here, don't tell Dave,
Hmm.
that we are also possibly, probably, going to be offering actual buildings from the city also.
I believe so. We're still in talks about that. Some of these temples are really large. Um, so we'll have to see, are we going to try to print these out from the standard scale for a player token to interact with on the from outside, or are we going to stick with a dungeon tile set that is themed for the Egyptian theme that allows players to build their own dungeons using these tile sets. Just like Legos will provide you, the pattern on what, let's say the rock and troll looks like, and you'll be able to go through and use the necessary pieces to build out the replica of what the rock and troll looks like in person if you are not necessarily looking then just to print out, a 2D map.
What are some of the challenges? Because obviously, both mediums are 3D, like working in the Unreal Engine, you have to work in 3 dimensions. And then obviously for making a mini of an actual building, that's naturally going to be 3D also. But what are some of the challenges with converting a design that you have in the Unreal to something that can be 3D printed?
Good question. Um, Even though they're both considered 3D models, they're very different between the two. In Unreal, when we're developing a building, the objective is to have it be high performing. So low polygon count, good textures. So you're going to get all of your feel and quality from these textures that make it look like it has depth and everything. So when you try to convert that into um, something for a miniature, we do not have the luxury of having normals or depth maps that make that detail come alive. So, because of that, we have to sculpt all of that in by hand. So, you'll go from like a building that maybe has 3,000 polys, which probably most of you, I don't know if that's good or bad. That's fairly low. Up to using probably roughly 300,000 upward of a million polygons or more for an actual miniature because we need the detail there for when we go to print it out.
When you think back to the 3D models that have been proposed and seem like we're working toward making available, which ones are you most excited for players to get their hands on?
There are so many unique ones, and as I'm sitting here talking, I have a plethora of test prints just sitting on my desk. Um, and one of the first ones that I printed out was this. It was the Mirage Demon, um, and with the sand look and I can't even describe it, but that these will be amazing to have, in person on a tabletop. And some of these honestly could even be printed out larger just for, a tabletop, just art piece just to have and to look at. Um, and then even looking at some of these that are pretty much no bigger than my thumb, the amount of detail that is in these are incredible. And you can see the smallest of things in like the eyes and ears and mouth. Um, they each have their own unique ones. But then we have a few that are going to be very large. So we're not only doing things on like this standard medium scale for a humanoid, we're getting up to, I think, huge or gargantuan, where we will have some, 3, 4 inch by like 6 inch tall miniatures that you'll be able to put on your battle grids to use. So that will be exciting, and they are heavy. They are solid.
I saw the test you did of the Mirage Demon, and I'm someone that collects just weird and, you know, gross and horror things in general. And I saw that and was like, oh my gosh, I want that just as a display piece to have around.
Exactly. Yep. And a lot of these can easily be used as display pieces. The amount of detail that are in them are incredible because we're not just doing standard like just 3D printing. We're doing high end, 8K, resin printing for these.
If for anyone out there who hasn't seen the Mirage Demon and doesn't know what we're talking about, go look us up on social media. We're on Instagram or Facebook. It's based on a piece from one of our artists. We have such an amazing team of artists that are really helping to develop the visual language of this project. And it's so gratifying to see some of these pieces that, like, oh, it's a painting that's beautiful, it's nice, but it takes on a whole new, like, tangible quality when it's printed in 3D. All right. Is there, before we wrap up here, would you like to tell us about any of the other projects that you are working on?
I have so many random things going on. It's ridiculous. Because I run my own small studio, I have clients all over the place. From medical to advertisements for characters, for the mascots for other companies. Our own personal stuff. Um, we kind of started working with what we have developed for this campaign as far as the map tool, because I firmly think that this tool is possibly beneficial for anyone that gets into playing Dungeons and Dragons. And if I can set up and provide these players a world that they can explore and, develop a story around, the maps will already be there for anything you can possibly come up with. So I, did something very briefly last month and released it on Steam as the Masterwork Fantasy Map Cartographer, long name. But I'm hoping that people will kind of grab this test tool, right? It's just an example, and provide their feedback if it's something that they think they would use. Because I'm looking for all kinds of feedback, and hopefully developing an expansive tool that allows players to use this tool to create maps, create stories, just using, imagine playing Boulder's Gate or anything like that, and having that whole world and all those characters and all of the buildings at your fingertips just to use as battle maps and to help you tell a story for your own tabletop. So that's probably I think a really interesting project, and I think something that is aligned with what we're doing here.
I saw you showing off that tool you were talking about in a meeting that we were in together, and it looks it honestly just looks like so much fun being able to make a map just, within a matter of minutes instead of having to search out for the right setting and the grid and everything else.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the trouble I see. Like even for myself, is I'd love to create a campaign, tell a story, but then I spend hours, if not days or longer, trying to come up with a map for my little alleyway or my bar scene or a tower. Right? You spend so long creating these maps to sometimes never using them again, or you're only using it for maybe a few hours and then you're done and you have to keep making more content. So, this is not necessarily a game or a tool to help make you maps. The idea is the map is already going to be provided so you can be, in and out grabbing whatever map or, visual that you need from the environment to go straight into your campaign with.
I love anything that helps to streamline the process to get back to the actual campaign and the storytelling instead of getting lost in the minutia of the prep.
Absolutely.
Okay, now before we go, I have a very hard-hitting question for you. Are you ready?
Uh-oh, here we go.
Mm-hmm. Be afraid. If you had a slice of lasagna and you take another slice of lasagna and put it on top of that, do you have two slices of lasagna or do you just have one mega lasagna?
That is a good question. So, from my knowledge of lasagna, I believe you would have two slices of lasagna, only for the fact of when you make your first lasagna and you bake it, you have a nice, crunchy, cheesy crust on top that acts as a barrier to keep separated all subsequent slices of lasagna. So, same question, if you have one cake and you put another cake on top, do you just have one giant cake or is it still two cakes?
You have zero cake because I've eaten it all.
There you go.
I need to stop wrapping these up by asking people food questions because inevitably I get done recording and I'm like, oh, it's snack time?
Oh man, I have a Milky Way sitting in front of me and it has been taunting me.
My gosh. Okay. Well, Mitch, it has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you, especially about something that I don't really know a lot about this project.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure connecting. And hopefully, this has given a lot of extra information for anyone curious about the Unreal development side of things.
All right. Well, my name is Lady X. This has been another episode of Keshanar Confidential. Make sure that you're following us on social media. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Tumblr, and YouTube. And you can get all kinds of really neat behind-the-scenes peeks of what we're doing, and occasionally, nifty little giveaways. Next week, I'm hoping to be talking to our resident Egyptologist, so stay tuned for that. I am an uncouth bystander of set, and I will see you next week.